Welcome back, everybody. Today's video is a Throwback Thursday video. I have been talking about my reread of the Dark is Rising sequence and promising and or threatening, however you want to take it, to do a video all about that series. So I thought Throwback Thursday would be a perfect opportunity to highlight this older series that I don't think gets talked about enough anymore. First, I will talk about a summary of the series and the books in it without getting too spoilery, while also giving you some trivia and facts about the series and the author. And then I'll talk about my own experiences reading the books and rereading the books. So the first story in the Dark is Rising sequence is called Oversea Under Stone. It was published in 1965. It's about a family with 3 kids, the Drews, and their children, Simon, Jane, and Barney. And they are on vacation during the summer in Cornwall on the sea. And they are vacationing with their family and their eccentric family friend who they call Great Uncle Mary, who is this mysterious kind of history archaeology professor who comes in and out of their lives. And he's a fixture, but he's also very mysterious, and they're not exactly sure how they came to know him, but he's just beloved. During their trip, they're drawn into an adventure where they're searching for the Holy Grail from Arthurian legend, and they find a map, and they are traveling all around Cornwall trying to discover the whereabouts of the Grail before the mysterious forces of the dark can get it first. They learn throughout the story that they are being drawn into this like age-old battle between the dark and the light that has been going on, like I said, for ages. And the dark is rising. The dark is gathering their forces for a final battle, and the light is looking for all of these weapons of power that they can use to drive the dark back so that it does not take over mankind. The Drews are completely mortal kids. They're very normal, and they're a really great dynamic trio, kind of. They're very much brothers and sister, and they're growing up, and they're awesome. I love them. So that's the first book in the series. The second one is The Dark is Rising, and we don't see the Drews at all in that one. The Dark is Rising is a great book to read around Christmas time. It's something that I love to reread at Christmas time because it is set at Christmas. It centers around Will Stanton, who is just turning 11 years old, and he is the youngest of a very large family in England, in Buckinghamshire, right near the palace and right in the Thames Valley. He discovers on his 11th birthday that he is the last of the old ones, which is a race of sort of immortals who are part of the light, and they battle the dark. And as the last of the old ones, he is the sign seeker, and he must gather all of these signs that will be one of the weapons to fight against the dark. The Drews are looking for the Grail in the first one, and he is trying to gather these 6 signs that he will bring together to use later in the battle to turn back the dark. We also get to see Great Uncle Mary again, but here we learn a little bit more about him, and we learn that his name is Merriman Lion, and he is the oldest of the old ones, or the first of the old ones, and he is Will's guide and mentor as he comes into his power as an old one. I really like this one. Is probably my favorite of the entire series. Then there is Greenwitch, which is a little bit of a shorter book. I would almost call it a novella. And that is when Will and the Drews get to meet for the first time. They're back in Cornwall for that one, the town from the first book. Then The Grey King, it's Will off on his own again, and he's in Wales this time, and he meets Bron Davies, who is a young Welsh boy, and he has mysterious ties to the light and the dark and the battle that they're going to fight. And then it all culminates in Silver on the Tree, which is the last book, and that is when everyone joins together and the dark is battled and the light tries to push back the dark. And this is the final time, and if they're successful, the dark will be vanquished for all time. Like I said, the first book was published in 1965. The second book wasn't published until 1973, and they kept coming out again until the late 70s. The first one, Oversea Under Stone, was written by Susan Cooper. They're all written by Susan Cooper, but Susan Cooper wrote it for a competition to honor the children's fantasy writer E. Nesbit, who was a prolific English writer in the early 1900s. I didn't really look too much into that. They were having a competition to honor her and her style of writing, and this is what Susan Cooper wrote, and I believe she won. I mean, I think she won, and we all won in the long run. Several of the books were nominated for the Newbery Award, which is an award for authors of kind of middle grade, early young adult fiction that are from America or live in America while they're writing it. And Susan Cooper is an English-born but American author, so she qualifies for that. I believe The Dark is Rising was nominated for the Newbery, and The Grey King, which is the fourth book, won the Newbery, which I think is interesting because I really do like The Grey King, but I don't think it's the strongest of the series. But I don't care, as long as one of them won, even if it's the fourth one. They also have won several of this Welsh award called Tir na Nog, which means Land of the Children, and those are for high quality books that have like a Welsh influence in them. The series as a whole kind of takes from a bunch of different mythologies and fantasy elements, which I really love. It's really unique to me. There's a lot of Arthurian legend, there's Welsh legends, there's even some like Norse mythology in there, and then Susan Cooper also like writes her own stuff. All of the stuff with the old ones is really fascinating how she did that. Her writing style is really beautiful as well. It's really lyrical, and I love that she takes you all around England in her stories, not London. Most books that you read have at least one or two scenes in London. I mean, Harry Potter, you could see King's Cross and everything in London before you go off to, you know, Hogwarts and things like that. But in this one, you're mostly, it's rural. It's all about this love of English heritage and English history and the land and like in Wales, and all her descriptions of the mountains and the fields. You could tell how much she loves her home, you know, where she was born. And I do recall that Maggie Stiefvater, the author of the Raven Cycle series, has cited The Dark is Rising as something that inspired her when she was writing these books. And you can see a lot of the things that influenced her when you're reading this series. Glendower shows up at one point. There are mysterious birds. There are kind of prophetic dreams. There is a raven boy. I wouldn't say that Maggie's style is super similar to Susan Cooper's, but you can see a lot of the same appreciation for a lot of the same things, and you can see how Maggie is also choosing a lot of the things that Susan Cooper chose from mythology and things like that to weave into her story as well, which is really cool. And I really love when two things that I like separately, I find out that they have a common thread. I don't think this is a really odd thing to happen, because you like certain things and then you like other certain things and you probably like them for the same reasons. So if they have a common thread, that shouldn't be a shock, but it is something I always like. Okay, so on to my private history with the Dark is Rising sequence. I first became aware of the series. A close friend of mine, like a childhood friend, when we were in middle school, junior high, we would share books whenever we were at each other's houses, and she gave me Oversea Understone the first time, and she told me, oh my gosh, I love these books. They're so good, you should read them. And I started Oversea Understone, and I did not really get into it. It was a little slow for me, and I was like, man, whatever, they're searching for a grail, or just boring on this seaside village. Because the first book is a little slower. I think it is a much more quiet book than the second one. And I got through it. It's not a super long book, and at that point in my life, as has continued for the rest of my life, I will read just about anything that you put in front of me. But I wasn't really invested in it. And then when I picked up the second book, that pulled me in, and I love The Dark is Rising. And I love in fantasy when there's kind of like a prophecy and there's a rhyme and things are being fulfilled in the prophecy as you go, and you're trying to figure it out and sort it out from the lines that you know already. And that's where it really hooked me, and that's probably why that one's my favorite to come back to over and over again. Will Stanton comes from a big family, and they're all really well fleshed out, even though there's like 9 kids in his family and his parents and the small village that he lives in. It did not deter at all my love of like anything English at that age and now. So when I met my friend Jen in college, and we got to talking about our likes and things like that. For some reason, the Dark is Rising series came up, and besides the friend who introduced me, I'd never had anybody else who just had randomly heard of the series and read it, and I'd already liked this girl Jen, and that was a moment where I was like, we are gonna be best friends. But neither of us had reread it in a long time, and over Christmas, like I've said in past videos, we were talking about it and how we couldn't remember really specific things about it, so we decided that we would reread it, and I made that one of my New Year's resolutions. Especially because on Christmas Day, I was sitting at my parents' house 3 hours away from my house, where my books were, and was suddenly overcome with a need to reread The Dark is Rising, since it's a Christmas book. And yeah, so I re-listened to the audiobooks, like I said, and it was so interesting to rehear them and reread them, because I found that I did remember more than I thought that I did, but it was kind of that, like, that memory that's just in the back of your head, and as soon as you hear it, you're like, oh yeah, and now this is gonna happen, that's gonna happen, we're gonna see this person next. And there's actually a scene in the beginning of Silver on the Tree where, and this isn't really spoilery, the Drews are in Wales and they are standing on a hill, and the youngest of the Drews, Barney, says, I feel like I've been here before. And they're like, you've never been to Wales, this is the first time we've ever come here. And he's like, yeah, but I know exactly what we're gonna see when we go over that next hill. And he says what they're gonna see, and they actually do see that. And that is how I felt rereading the series. Like, oh, it's been a long time since I've been here. I've not been here in a long time. I shouldn't remember anything. And all of a sudden I'm like, oh no, I know what's gonna happen after that next hill. I know what's gonna happen on this next page, which is really great. I just really like this series. I could talk about it forever. So that is it for me and this Throwback Thursday. I hope if you haven't read these books that you will give them a try, or if you have read them before, that you are inspired to reread them. Make sure you do all those nice things you can do on YouTube, like this video, subscribe, hit that subscribe button underneath me, and share it wherever you like and wherever you know people who like good stories are hanging out. And comment below. Let's get in a conversation about The Dark is Rising.